Across Asia, more than 1,000 people have been killed as storm-driven floods and landslides batter different parts, including Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Sri Lanka. Millions are stranded or displaced. Search and rescue teams saying conditions are treacherous, with hundreds still missing. Common factor among these disasters being climate change. Let's start off with Indonesia, for example. It's the hardest hit. At least 502 people have lost their lives. Entire communities in northern Sumatra are consumed after the cyclone there triggered catastrophic floods and landslides. More than 500 people remain unaccounted for, and the military has been deployed across the island to airlift supplies to cut off districts. Helicopter footage showing what used to be villages now completely submerged under brown churning water. Survivors have described losing everything in minutes, while others fled in the dark after waking up to the sound of water pushing through their homes.
Inside my house, we can't stand normally. We have to sit, and we can reach onto the roof. It's all covered in mud, because if we want to throw the mud away, we don't know where to throw it. We can't throw it away. We can't go in and sleep anymore. We can't.
In Thailand, 176 people confirmed dead, with nearly 2.8 million impacted. Southern districts faced once in 300 years rainfall. Hat Yai city was hit particularly hard. Flood levels reached more than 8 feet, cutting power, isolating a maternity ward, caring for 30 newborns. Survivors have described clinging on to windowsills and stacking themselves on washing machines to stay above the rising water levels. Helicopters have been dropping oxygen tanks as well as food as authorities race against time to reach the remote areas. Officials say water levels have now started to recede, but the fears remain about further rainfall. Meanwhile, in Sri Lanka, a separate storm has left 355 people dead, almost 1.1 million impacted. The government has called it the most extensive disaster the country has ever faced.
As a country, we are facing the largest and most challenging natural disaster in our history. We also recognize that what we are undertaking is the most difficult rescue operation in our nation's history. This is the first time the entire country has been struck by such a disaster.
Thousands of homes have been destroyed. Nearly 150,000 people have been pushed into temporary shelters. Rescue teams saying some families were stranded on rooftops for days with no electricity or phone signals.
In the night, things were normal. By next morning, everything was underwater, including our house. 7 of us, including children, took refuge on the top floor. There are another 15 adults still there. Their houses are completely underwater.
Local charities and volunteers are traveling by boats to deliver meals and relief to families cut off from the capital. Aid workers saying the need is overwhelming. Many people have to start again from zero. India also launched an operation, a humanitarian assistance and disaster relief initiative to support Sri Lanka after the cyclone struck. An Indian Air Force aircraft carrying around 12 tons of humanitarian aid, including tents, blankets, hygiene kits, ready-to-eat food items, reached Colombo on November 29. In Malaysia, 2 deaths have been reported so far. More than 34,000 people were evacuated, As the tropical storm there made landfall, some families described being trapped in open fields with rising water on all sides before help finally arrived. Now, meteorologists are saying the disasters appear connected to two active systems, Typhoon Koto in the Philippines and Cyclone Senyar in the Malacca Strait. But scientists warn that warmer oceans and a hotter atmosphere, basically both driven by climate change, are making storms more intense and rainfall far more extreme. Remember, Southeast Asia remains one of the world's most climate vulnerable regions, and these back-to-back storms follow lethal floods in Vietnam earlier this month, and this was in November to be precise, and two typhoons that forced mass evacuations in the Philippines. For millions across the region, the monsoon this season is far from over, and the recovery has only just started. Pakistan and Afghanistan are facing their worst tensions in years, and caught in the middle of that, millions of ordinary Afghans who have long called Pakistan home in a way. As the border clashes have intensified and crossings have been shut down, Pakistan has launched one of the largest mass expulsions the region has seen in decades. So far this year, about 1 million of the 3 million Afghans living in Pakistan have been deported or forced to return. Many of them have never set foot in Afghanistan. They were born and raised in Pakistan, reportedly, and were a part of a refugee community that began arriving more than 40 years ago after the Soviet invasion in 1979. And now, for thousands of families, that haven seems to be vanishing. On the outskirts of Karachi, families are packing their entire lives onto a single truck. Bed frames, water jerry cans, even a few chickens. A 7-year-old baby will be carried into a country his parents only know through stories, for example. Afghans have moved back and forth across the border for years. They moved to regions where people share language, culture, family ties, but this time rights groups are saying that the crackdown is different. Pakistan has vowed to expel all Afghans, regardless of their immigration status or the risks that they face under the Taliban rule. The United Nations Refugee Agency has urged Pakistan to protect those who face real dangers if returned. The body warned that many are being sent back to a country which will further deepen the humanitarian crisis. As jobs are scarce, housing is unaffordable, discrimination is common under the Taliban regime. The pressure is not coming only from Pakistan. Iran, which is another of Afghanistan's neighbors, has also forced out more than 1.5 million Afghans this year. Pakistan and Iran have expelled more than 4.5 million people reportedly since 2023, half of them in just the last 12 months. The impact on Afghanistan is enormous, to say the least. Remittances from these communities, money sent back home, has been a lifeline for the country's collapsing economy, and now Afghanistan is struggling to absorb waves of the returning families with no homes, no support as such, and almost no place to go. Inside Pakistan, the crackdown has grown to be more aggressive. Landlords have been urged to evict Afghan tenants. In some provinces, citizens have been encouraged to report their Afghan neighbors through whistleblower systems. And according to the UN Refugee Agency, Pakistan has arrested 12 times more Afghans this year than the last. The government saying its own economic struggles make the expulsions necessary. But human rights groups are warning that what we are seeing unfold is a humanitarian emergency in real time, one that is forcing families to return to a country they no longer recognize, and in many cases have never known. Indian markets are scaling fresh record highs and GDP growth continues to surprise on the upside. But the rupee seems to be telling a very different story. On Monday, Indian benchmark surged to new all-time highs before paring those gains on weak global cues. The Sensex reached a record intraday peak of 86,159, while the Nifty climbed to a lifetime high of about 26,326. That surge in stocks early on Monday was largely driven by domestic investors. However, the rupee continues to falter, trading near its record lows. The currency has fallen to repeated new all-time lows, despite the latest data showing the economy expanding at a faster than expected pace of 8.2%. In fact, weak trade flows, the absence of a US-India trade deal, and over $16 billion of foreign investor outflows have kept the rupee under pressure. India's trade deficit is at a record high, and reliance on imported crude, continues to push up the dollar demand. Sanctions on Russian oil giants have also indirectly weighed on the Indian currency. A deep dive into the over 3-decade journey of the rupee gives us a compelling narrative. By 1991, due to a severe balance of payments crisis, India undertook economic liberalization. That included a significant devaluation of the rupee to about 17.9 rupees per dollar. The correction back then reflected economic reforms like tariff reductions and encouragement of foreign investment. And over the years, over the 1990s and 2000s, the rupee depreciated gradually from 22 to 25 rupee levels in the early 1990s to about 44 to 47 rupees by 2000 and 45 to 46 rupees by 2010. And since then, the currency has fallen more significantly to about 90 per dollar last month. IMF expecting India to cross $4 trillion in 2026 and reach just under $5 trillion by 2028, almost $200 billion lower than earlier projections. And here's the key risk here. Economists are saying a calibrated depreciation is now inevitable, with the IMF projecting the rupee around 87 in 2026 and 87.7 in 2027. The fund does not see a crisis, but also warns of periodic pressure from global uncertainty, tight financial conditions, and trade shocks. India's long journey from 17 rupees a dollar in 1990 to nearly 90 today reflects higher inflation than the US, persistent trade deficits, and the heavy oil import bill. The country, which is the world's second largest consumer of crude imports, over 85% of its needs, and unless the currency stabilizes, a weaker rupee could delay India's ambition to become the world's third largest economy, even as growth and markets continue to outperform. To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.